Oh,
just kidding. Thank you all for your patience, and we'll skip all the preliminary highs and we'll get right into it, respecting everybody's time. Thanks again for your patience, and I hope Ian Reed caught up with all the good housekeeping in his waiting room while he was waiting. We've got a really exciting agenda tonight, and starting with discussion or our two presentations on the recent Canadian Indoor Track and Field Championships. They were about, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, I guess. We have Bill Mcmakin on the line from New Brunswick. He's going to talk about the facilities and the events readiness. And Andy Walker is going to talk about what they did in the call room to make that event happen. And then we'll move over to Richard Winton. He's going to talk about the call room for combined events at major meets. I saw Richard do this at the Pan Am Games in 2015 in Toronto, and what a plum posting. I think is the envy of any essay job. And then Jennifer's going to give an update on the shoe inspection process at the end of the day. So really full agenda, but some really good topics here. So I'll just go ahead and introduce Bill. But before we do, I forgot to mention, we are recording this session. It will be posted on the Athletics Canada website. So just let everybody know that. Now, Bill Mcmakin, for those of you who don't know who he is, he's the president of the St. John's Reds Track and Field Club, which is a regional partnership of all the track and field clubs in the area, plus University of New Brunswick. And it's one of the oldest track and field clubs in the Atlantic region. He was, or is still, I guess, the project leader for planning, designing, and fundraising for this field house that the Irving Oiled Field House. And it opened 2 years ago, bad timing from a COVID side, but their first national competition was held, the Indoor Canadian Championships recently. So really good. Well, I've heard him talk about the building of the field house, and it's an amazing story. Bill was also the chairman of the BC Athletics Board of Directors from 2017 to 2021. And he's also the past president of Athletics New Brunswick. So all things track and field, or athletics actually. So without ado, I'll pass it over to Bill. And Serge, can you pass control to Bill so that he can drive his show, his presentation? Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Brian.
He could share his screen.
All right, I am good. And Brian, you just had your little bit of a Freudian slip there saying I was a past chair at BC Athletics. I can't wait to tell McCalder that I'm one of his past bosses. I'll save that for an email tomorrow. Anyway, I think you meant to say past president of Athletics New Brunswick. Anyway, welcome everybody, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to come on. There's some familiar faces here and folks that have a bit of an intimate knowledge now with the facility because you were there officiating. And I appreciate those of you who took the time to make it down to New Brunswick. I think, as Brian mentioned just in my brief introduction there, I always say I'm a little bit of a Swiss Army knife in athletics. I was an athlete as a young guy and as a university, I say mediocre athlete, and then got myself into coaching and club leading and associations and event building and hosting, and I officiate a bit, and I do a little bit of anything. And I'm not sure I'm good at any of it, but I can do a lot of it reasonably well. So I describe myself as a bit of a Swiss Army knife in that respect from an athletics point of view. Both Jennifer and Brian indicated they want me to give a little bit of snapshot about this facility, and it's a bit of a unique animal that began in my life a little over 9 years ago. Actually, March 13th, 2013, I had the first meeting involved with this facility, although I'd had some initial meetings prior where I ended up in a situation where I had a chance to grab a hold of this. And it was a bit unique because it's unusual for a track and field person to be at the helm of something like this. And it allowed us to create something we think is pretty special from our own sport point of view. When we look around the countryside, we often see places where they built soccer facilities and put a square track around them or something equally stupid. And we were fortunate to get something that's a little bit more of a gem here, including supporting some of those, some of the other sports like soccer and field sports, etc. The naming of it is, if you've ever been to St. John, you know the Irving family is a big influence in our lives and a significant employer and contributor. And to be honest, this facility got pretty well 3/4 of the way to completion before the Irving family got involved as a major donor. So they were actually kind of a little bit at the tail end of the situation, although they'd been supported behind the scenes. Economics and oil prices and a number of things that prevented them from getting involved until really at the tail end. But it did become named the Irving Oil Field House, which is how we refer to it. Those that were around a week or two ago know we had a pretty exciting and successful 22 season. It was successful but challenging. We had 5 track events between November and the last, which was U Sports Championships a couple weeks ago. We capped it off with 10 days of the Canadian Indoor Championships, but really through March, we had an Atlantic Indoor with about 150 to 180 athletes. We took a week off and hosted the Conference Championships in another part of the province, but then had the Canadian Masters and AC Indoor combined, and then followed that with 4 days later with U Sport Championships. So, and I don't think I've quite recovered yet, but as same with our volunteer group. There's about 1,000 athletes, coaches, and officials over the 10-day period with the indoor and the U Sport. What was, I think, most difficult is the schedule changed 3 times between, well, not even withstanding the start of the pandemic. This was an event, most of these events were expected to be hosted either in 2020 or 2021. All got bumped to this year, and the schedule even this year changed 2 and 3 times. This event, the AC Indoor, actually had 3 different dates at one point. U Sport had 2, and we juggled many different things, including the combination of the Masters and the AC Indoors, and including changing COVID protocols, which we kept having to kind of figure our way through as to what we'd be allowed to do. The interesting thing about the AC Indoors is up until 3 weeks prior, we still weren't 100% sure we'd be able to have it, even though we had open registration. And then as the province began to lift restrictions and get a little more flexible, it was obvious we could. Anyway, we were happy with how things went, and I'll comment on that a little bit later too. What's interesting about this facility is really we had a vision of being able to build something very unique east of Montreal. There isn't a fully functional 200-meter indoor track facility anywhere in Atlantic Canada that can handle an event of any kind of national scale. We have a couple of 4-lane ones. We have a couple of 166-meter ones. We have an elevated 200-meter track in Halifax. Can't do all the field events. We didn't have a complete setup. So this was always envisioned once I get involved with something that could do that, but also serve other sports. We have turf fields to support track and soccer, football, baseball training, all kinds of things. But we do have a strong track and soccer community. So we built a lot of the core of the particular facility design around that. However, at last count, when I talked to management of the facility, there's about 49 different user groups that use this facility for varying things, including police and fire training, any number of different things. It also held a 70-person daycare facility, a wellness center, fitness center, which is all run by the YMCA of Greater St. John. Here's kind of an aerial view. And this part of town in East St. John is notorious for flooding when it rains. So we have an extensive stormwater management system with a nice little park around it that we built, which actually was an award-winning design by one of our regional architects. But the main reason this facility is here is kind of because of that track in the corner. And that's not a running track, that's a harness racing track. And this area is the historic exhibition grounds of St. John. And this organization has done a fair bit of property development around this space and had wanted to make an investment in new asset in the community and began to look at a recreational facility about 10 years ago. Hence sort of when I got involved. They donated the land, they donated $5 million in cash towards this project, and that was really what got it its start. The Exhibition Association of St. John, which is a 125-year-old organization, saw fit to sort of make a new type of investment on their grounds, and that sort of sowed the seed that allowed us to get moving. When you look at how it happened, between the time I initially met with that group, and I'm not even going to try to read all this, it's more to illustrate a point, is that over the 9 years, even to this date, and in the lead up to the design, I visited 60 facilities either through my track travel, my business travel, or some other reason I was elsewhere. I visited 60 facilities, created a business plan from that with the help of my father-in-law, who was retired project manager. Read every research report on recreation and stuff that I could find to identify ways to make the project more viable, and basically came up with some development goals that we felt would help drive the project as we began to launch it, which was to have a very high quality but flexible facility, to have one that could support program growth in our region, one that would have a community wellness impact as well, but also act as an economic impact from the point of view of sport tourism and events. And when you really put those four pieces of the puzzle together, you come up with a facility that could do something pretty special in the community, even though it's a bit unique in terms of seeing a new track facility get built. And one of the key pieces was the sport tourism potential of national events that a track and field facility could bring to this region that could not come to any community east of Montreal prior to that. So, when you look at the ownership of it, people often ask me who owns it. It's owned by a not-for-profit organization, not a municipality, not a university. It's chaired by a board, small board, which I actually chair still. We're forced to maintain a self-sustaining operating model, which means we cannot go back to our municipality or our university and get subsidies. We do get some support still from the Exhibition Association, but we were really required to try to find a way to make this thing stand on its own 2 feet, which made facing a pandemic in the first 5 months of its operation a bit challenging. It still is a bit. It's professionally managed by the YMCA as a contractor. They run community center programs, childcare programs there. They manage the day-to-day operations of the facility and the user groups with really a focus on, getting renters in there, building programs and building membership. And the event hosting side is pretty significant. There's regular soccer, track, ultimate frisbee, rugby, lacrosse, badminton type of events that can be in there that have been in there since the beginning, that are regional or smaller. We have a fairly significant bunch of regional events, the Atlantic Conference. You're well aware and have already heard of us hosting U Sport and Canadian Indoor and Canadian Masters. There's a major canine agility event held in there next fall for people who have dogs that do the types of agility competitions. It's supposed to be one of the biggest ones in Canada. And there's talk, and we may host Canadian Indoor again next year, but we'll certainly host the Atlantic Conference universities. And there's talk of a Canadian Karate Championships in that facility, which sort of points to its flexibility in terms of the way we built it. Just in terms of what it cost about $27 million to build. And that's how we broke it down. It's actually less than 50% funded by the provincial and federal government, which to our knowledge is the lowest percentage funding from those sources across the country, because typically they're a third and a third each, so 2/3 funded by them. That either means I was a fool and we were idiots and we didn't get enough money from those folks or something, but that was the recipe that we had to kind of work through and live with in the day to get it done. What's interesting that I've seen in recent weeks is a number of new facility announcements. And if we were trying to build this in the post-pandemic era, it would be probably 25 to 30% more expensive based on the pricing that I'm seeing on other projects right now. So I kind of count our blessings that we got through it when we did back in 2019. For those that have been to the track, it's a blue track. Sometimes people ask me why, and most people who know me know because my favorite color is blue, and I get to pick it. So it's absolutely no more scientific than that. And at one point it was going to be a single color blue, and I kind of liked the alternating lanes, and we managed to beat a deal out of the track supplier to get them to provide it at the same price. And so we have 2-color blue and with a kind of a gray interior. In the main infield, you'll see typically there's turf on it, and the turf is removable. So recently for the Canadian Championships, we removed a third of it in order to create flexible areas for high jump. But then a week later for the U Sport Championships, we removed the other end so that we could throw onto the hard floor instead of the turf. And we also relocated our pole vault and had to remove some for it. So we took probably 3/4 of the turf in the main center field out. Just to give you a sense of the facility and a few of the things here, it's 127,000 square feet, which is pretty big. It's an 8-lane on the straight, 200-meter track, 6 lanes on the oval. There's the 2 turf fields, which are roughly the size of a hockey rink. There's multiple team rooms, multi-purpose rooms. I mentioned the fitness center. There's free parking, which was another interesting thing, because as I had been reading about preparation for the youth sport events, I remembered having to pay parking when I was in at U of A to the championships a few years ago, and our parking was free, which was kind of a nice feature to have. People love that always. And then we brought in a fair bit of additional equipment. We had to bring in crowd barriers. We had to bring in additional bleacher seating. We supplemented the PA system a bit, and obviously brought in video and web streaming for U Sport, which was broadcast over CBC. But when you take a look at sort of the basic design of the facility, the entry point, the long main corridor that takes you down through team rooms, multi-purpose rooms, for those that were there officiating, this is where we gathered all our officials for meetings and food and a little bit of hospitality. Most of the main seating was down this wing or this wing, but the second turf field was available to us over here as a warm-up space. So we had basically a full size, 1/3 size soccer field for people to do their warm-ups on, stay off the track, but get warmed up, to jog, to stretch, to do anything they needed. Created a gathering space. Got a lot of flexibility in the system in that we have a throws cage, which probably could still be better, but is pretty darn good. It drops from the ceiling like a raised and lowered curtain, so there's no setup time for us. We can drop it down for weight throw and put it back up for shot put to create better visibility, and it's like seconds to move it up and down. We removed turf, as it shows here, to create a bigger high jump area. Under normal smaller meets, this is still covered in turf, and we just jump off the D on the end here. And typically for a smaller regional meet, we don't even rent the second soccer field. We just keep obviously the whole track accessible, and we keep our throws here, and we have some warm-up space on here, and we allow a little bit more generous access to the track for warm-up. It allows us to keep the facility moving and active and not pay as much rent, because we have to rent it obviously if we take the whole thing. There's 2 locations for pole vault, which was kind of neat. The first time we've ever used that was U Sport recently, and it allowed us to move it to more in front of the spectator seating. And if you've been, it's similar to the setup at U of A at the Butterdome, or similar, but on the opposite side, I think, of where it is at York. And you do have to do a little bit of scheduling and planning, which we learned. We thought we had it nailed down pretty well, but a few safety concerns just in terms of between it and pole vault, mostly if pole vault runs long. So little things like that we had to take into account that we learned. I mean, the facility's 2 years old, but we already, this was the first time we'd really test driven it as a national event venue, and very happy with how it turned out, but there's no question we learned a few things as well. The facility preparation side was also driven a lot by COVID. We were required by U Sport, for example, to maintain areas where really only spectators were allowed, which were these 2 sort of side wings of the building, and to try to keep other spaces a little bit more clean and separated for athletes. It was a bit of a challenge. If you know anything about, if you've ever been to youth sports, it's a little more raucous than the AC event we'd had the week before. Athletes are basically everywhere, and it gets harder and harder to differentiate between who's an athlete and who's not at times as the meet rolls along. But I think we were fortunate that, based on most of the feedback we've had, we had a safe event and didn't have a lot of COVID-related issues anyhow. We added music into the atmosphere for them. Feedback from most people on the surveys that they love the venue. It has a lot of natural light, which is another unique feature we saw in a lot of places. There's big bay windows to the ceiling in each of the end 3 corners and each of the ends of these walls. So I don't know what you folks, but when you're officiating indoor meets and you're inside for a whole 8-hour stretch, you get kind of that sick building feeling. I have found personally, having spent a lot of time in there, the natural light makes a huge difference in terms of how you feel as the day goes along. Makes a nice atmosphere. And probably the only other feedback we got about the events, more so on the AC one, was, the desire to have stronger fields and better attendance. And the Maritimes is a long ways away for people to come to. It wasn't helped by the pandemic, of course, because at some points people weren't even sure they could travel. But I think we'll maybe test drive it another year and see how it goes before it goes elsewhere. But I think we ran a good event, and I appreciate the help that all the officials gave, because the quality of officiating at both events was critical to its success. For me, I had the luxury of working through this project through paper, a lot of fundraising, a lot of help, but it became a bit of a personal project for me to try to see through. I was on site for construction almost every day, except for about 20 during an 18-month construction cycle. I could quote you almost verbatim every change order that we authorized and everything that went over budget. And but not much gave me, none of that gave me any more satisfaction than seeing, 300 and some age class athletes and masters and 550 U Sports athletes competing there a couple of weeks ago. That was, to me, so the pinnacle so far. And it's quite a unique, it was just very rewarding to see that after such a long time. The venue worked well, and it continues to work well. We did a lot of checking on things as I said, the 60 facilities I visited made a huge difference in designing something that works. And I think in the end, we got a product that works very well. Most people, when they ask me what's missed, I can tell them because I know. And in most cases, it's 90% of it, it's cases of things that we couldn't afford to do and made a conscious decision to not include. And in a couple of cases, it's the odd miss here and there of things we didn't think of. But it's been a good facility, and I've had a lot of contacts from across the country of people trying to figure out how to get one built in their backyard. I'm not sure I'm much help in that regard, but it's certainly not opposed to providing whatever advice or support I can. And Brian, I don't know if that was helpful, but that was between you and Jennifer. That was, I guess, the story I was told to tell. All right.
Really good, Bill. It's an amazing story. That's the second time I've heard variants of this presentation, and what you went through to build a facility like this, the partnerships and the hurdles. It's an amazing story. It's well done. It looks fantastic too. So.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'll say is that if you're interested in pursuing something like this, it becomes a bit of a commitment. I went through 7 different elections of governments, municipal, provincial, and federal, through the cycle of getting this thing open, and in New Brunswick, every one of them was a change in party. So, and you know what typically happens in those circumstances. So it had lots of bumps and grinds, let's just say, as it went along.
So have you patented that blue color so the next indoor facility has to pick a swimming pool blue or something?
I don't.
Anyways,
I think anybody can have that color.
Okay. Any questions for Bill here? Anthony, do we have any in the chat? Can you just do a quick?
Just while you're asked, did you have any spike use on that turf field?
Yeah, the turf is no real problem to use spikes on. I'm not sure it helps them any, but it certainly doesn't hurt the turf. The turf is pretty much indestructible. So yeah, they can. One of the bits of feedback we did get from the AC meet was they would have liked to have had a little bit of an opportunity to get on the track for warm up on spikes, because certainly the turf doesn't provide, exactly the warm up terrain some of them would have liked to have had, but that's something we can maybe look at another time. Not an uncommon request. Up to 7 millimeter. It's a Bainan surface out of the US, so similar to what's in Manitoba, and I'm not sure where else, but certainly in Guelph and a number of other outdoor facilities. I mean, basically we're down to 2 track manufacturers in Canada now, between Mondo and Bainan. So, and it's the finer grind finish of polyurethane that they put on top of it, called a Hobart finish, but it's pretty durable. We're very happy with it.
Any other questions? Well, thank you again, Bill. Hopefully we can call on you again for the next project that come and build one in BC or somewhere else. But thank you again. Appreciate the presentation. So let's build on that with Andy Walker, who's going to tell us about running the call room at this facility and the lessons learned, the experiences he went through. So I'm going to drive the slides, but I think, Andy, you can just talk and let me know when it's time to move on. The next slide.
All right. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay, Brian?
Sorry, yes, sorry, yes.
All right. So Bill Mcmakin deserves a lot of credit for this facility. It's beautiful. It's a tremendous monument to his legacy, and it's officially known as the Irving Oil Facility, but it should be known as the Bill Mcmakin Fieldhouse. So it's a great facility, purpose-driven for track, and is a real joy to work in. So next slide, Brian. So I'm just going to have a short presentation here about running a call room in this facility. As I said, it's a beautiful facility. We're going to talk about what we required to run the facility or run the event. As Bill says, there were complaints about not getting on the track. That's because we wouldn't let them through the call room, and I'll show you how that worked in a few minutes. Many of you were there, Mandy and Jennifer and a few others, Serge. I mean, it was a great event, and it was limited only by the fact that there were probably not as many participants as there would be normally in non-COVID times. We also had the Masters event at the same time, which threw a few little complications into the running of a call room, but we managed. And we also decided early on that the field events would report directly to their event and not go through the call room, which of course made the call room management a lot simpler. So next slide, Brian. So as I said, it's a beautiful facility for athletics, purpose-built. All aspects of events are considered. Bill did a great job in designing it. Sorry, back one. We couldn't get into the facility until 9 o'clock the night before. There were other scheduled events running, so it wasn't really a problem. But we did have to keep in mind that we had to work around other sports that were using the facility, and it was they were right on the field as soon as we finished the meet on Sunday as well. But it was a great experience for everybody involved: athletes, fans, volunteers, and officials. Next slide. So we started the event by having the typical call room schedule, which we broke down as granular as we could. We didn't have the final schedule until the night before. Serge kept changing it, but the last change was pretty minor. Good suggestion is to have a computer and a printer available so you can do the schedule up as the technical requirements dictate. Next slide. So this is a look at the call room entrance from the practice field, the warm-up facility, which is the soccer field that Bill spoke about. We're in the corner of the soccer field, and that's the space that we were allotted. There's a picture there of Mr. Yee, who felt that the call room was his personal resting space. We couldn't really tell him that it was not that, but anyway, you'll see a few pictures of them. But this is the entrance to the call room. The athletes come in here with the two volunteers at the desk who were giving hip numbers, checking them off, and then when they got into the call room, we checked their spikes and other things. So next slide. This is another picture of the call room entrance, Mr. Yee in the background again. And as you can see, we have setups for about 6 heats. There were no events that had more than 4, so we have plenty of room. And there's the window that Bill was talking about that are on that side of the facility that let a lot of light in. And the call room washroom was on the left of that picture through the other. There's a window on you can see right on the left of the picture there, and we had a couple of porta johns outside that door, which were used for call room purposes only. Next slide. And this is the exit from the call room, where you exit it to the track. We line the athletes up here where that blue piece of tape is on the floor, and we would marshal them out to their event start from there. And the quality of the volunteers was extremely good. We found them to be committed. They really cared about what they were doing. They did a good job. They showed up when they were supposed to. Jennifer, would you agree that the volunteers were excellent at this event?
I totally agree. They were great to work with. I'd work
Yeah.
with them in the drop
Yeah.
of a hat.
Yeah, I sent them all a note afterwards, by the way, thanking them for the volunteer, because they all did a great job. And what else about this picture? So you can see the athletes warming up in the background there. The event or the call room was cordoned off with sort of a chain and post setup, which worked pretty well. We had a few incursions that weren't appropriate, but we monitored it pretty closely.
Can
Next
we
slide,
add
Brian.
one?
Sorry.
Bill, can we go back to that slide? In the
Yeah.
back there with where the yellow jacket is, that's where we had the physiotherapist, the athletic
Yes.
therapist, and the first responders. And a good thing we did have first responders there for the paramedics, because we did have an incident on the track where we had to call them out to deal with an athlete that collapsed. So we were very, very tight group in the practice area, but it worked very well.
Yeah,
Good
it
job
did.
by you, Andy.
Next slide. So this is another picture of the call room with the setup and some of the signage. Next slide, Brian. So this is the event protocol. We had this at the entrance to the call room, and for each session, we put the schedule, the granular schedule onto the board with the meet schedule below it, and a notice that field events were to report directly to their events. So that worked pretty well. Next slide, Brian. So some other considerations, we could have used a portable sound system. We got along okay without it, but always handy to have a good sort of a simple little portable sound system that can broadcast messages to the warm-up area, the athletes who were warming up. Basically, I used a loud voice, which worked fairly well, but a portable sound system would have been useful. Good signage is always critical. We developed some as we worked through the meet. Enforcing the restricted area was very important because, as Bill said, we did restrict use of the track for event athletes only. So athletes typically will want to warm up on the track, especially as the practice area is turf and not track surface. And we did try to keep that fairly consistent so that no athlete got an advantage over another one. And it worked fairly well, except that we did have a few complaints about some athletes. The only event that it was a bit of a problem was hurdles. We did allow some athletes on the track, to practice hurdles, because obviously the takeoff on the hurdle from turf is not the same as from a track. The cadence of the heats went really well. We sort of held ourselves back from getting athletes to the line early. We did that did happen a few times, but we were fairly well timely in all our marshaling. And as I said before, we had a committed group of volunteers who did a great job, and they were very, very, we were very happy with them. So, and that's it, I think. Any questions?
I think that was good. Must be the Atlantic hospitality that brings out the good volunteers. Hey, question. Can I jump off in the first question here? And that is the exit of the call room. I noticed two officials there. What were the officials there doing? How did that work?
Well, we actually had one permanent official there, or volunteer. She was basically recording for the heat sheets. So we had two heat sheets for each event, and one went with the athletes to the start, and the others stayed with us, and we just noted on at the time that the athletes left, any scratches that occurred, any other odd things that might have happened. An athlete once in a while would come late, and we'd have already marshaled the event to the starting line, and we'd note on it that the athlete had showed up late, just in case there was a problem. There didn't happen to be any yet, but any appeals or anything like that, but we were ready for it if there were.
Any others? Anthony, can you monitor the chat and see if there's what the questions are?
I don't see any questions in the chat.
No?
No.
Okay, thanks. It was a great event and really, really wonderful facility. I can't emphasize enough, especially those of us who are from Atlantic Canada. And, as Bill has said, this is the only facility of its quality east of Montreal.
We did just get one question in the chat about field events. What did you do for those? Did you marshal them in the call room?
No, we didn't. We decided, the technical folks decided that the field events would go directly to the field, to their location. So we didn't marshal them at all.
Any other questions for? Good.
I think the question
Andy,
is, Keith here, I think the question that David had was that how much did they have to report to the field event site, I assume for warm up or just checking in?
Yeah, depending on the event, it would have been the normal time of 30 minutes ahead or 50 minutes ahead, whatever the event was. Yeah, we would make sure we would indicate to them the time periods that they had to report to the event, but they didn't go through the call room. So that was made it a lot easier to run the call room without the field events, let me tell you. Yeah, Jane said they reported 30 minutes before.
Yeah, and I guess as meet director, part of my motivation for that was with mixing the masters and the range of age groups and the combination of age groups and things that we did. We just thought, you know what, let's keep the call room simple and manage the track side and let the field and the throws and other field officials manage the intake of their own athletes. They did funnel through the call room in the end, sort of as their access point, but that still got them onto the track under some supervision.
The masters folks threw another twist into the call room operation. I don't believe are used to call room reporting, and they kind of took it pretty casually. But we managed, and they were a lot of fun actually to be around.
I think they are used to masters. They just don't let the call room. They just don't let on.
No, they didn't like the call room, but they certainly got used to it after the first day of being with Andy and myself.
Yeah, and Mr. Yee in particular parked himself there.
Well, he did every
Reputation.
event, so he never really was out of cycle.
Yeah, that's right.
Very good. Anthony, was there any more that's come in there?
Yeah, just one more that came in about what happened to athletes after the event, like post-event. Where did they go?
Yeah, so there was no formal mixed zone. There wasn't really a need for that. They basically left their bags and their gear on the warm up area and returned to the warm up area for that. So it really was pretty informal.
Is that it, Anthony?
Yeah, I think that was all of them.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Andy. That was very nice. Very well done.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Bill.
Special thanks to Jennifer, by the way, who was a great help, as she always is.
Thank you.
Wealth of knowledge. All right, so let's leave the East Coast and go into snowy Manitoba, and we'll catch up with Richard, who's going to talk about his experiences or combined events, call room officials for combined events. So just like the last one, Richard, I'll drive the slide if you want to do the talking.
You bet. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Brian and Jennifer asked me to talk to you today about some position that's not often used, but it's a very interesting position. I had the pleasure of being assigned the position during the 2015 Toronto Pan Am Games. Myself and an American official by the name of Marianne Daniel were assigned as the combined events call rooms, and we spent time with the combined events referees and the heptathletes and the decathletes through their days of their events throughout the competition. And it's from that experience that most of this information comes. And we always hear that we talk about call rooms when we discuss them, and talk about combined events coming into the call room. And, everybody says combined events comes in, they get the first event checked, and then the other checks are done somewhere else. Well, this is going to be the other places where they do, and the duties of the call room, the combined events call room officials. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. So if we go to the next slide, please. The combined events call room officials are actually part of the call room team. And they spend the day with the combined events referees, with the athletes at the event sites, and also in the combined events rest area, which we'll talk about on its own in a little while. And the combined events officials work under the direction of the combined events referee, or working in concert with the combined events referee for many different things, timings and things like that. And we'll talk about that when we get into the duties of the position. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about when and why a combined events call room official is assigned. We'll talk about the rest area. We'll talk about the equipment that the position requires, and then we'll talk about the duties, some of the what they actually do when they're out there with the athletes. So next slide, please. So when and why are the combined events athletes assigned? And the next slide will start us off. And as per the Athletics Canada policy, at major meets in Canada, Athletics Canada, along with the NOC chair, will appoint the referees in chief for any meet, and then the meet officials coordinator will assign the remaining officials. And it's these individuals that will determine whether there is a need for, or whether and who will actually fill the position of combined events call room officials. Next slide. And why do we have combined events call room officials? Well, it does provide flexibility because of the nature of the competition. Multi-events during a whole day. It frees up the main call room so it can run a little more efficiently, so they're not doing multiple checks on these individuals as they go through the call room. And they also provide a sort of a presence, if you will, of the call room in the combined events rest area. And because of the duties of the combined events call room officials having to do some checks and things like that, it's important that the call room has some representation in that particular area. So combined event, next slide, please, Brian. Combined events athletes, as you know, are only required to report to the main call room once each day at the beginning of the day, and the main call room does the checks for the first event of that day. So day one of the decathlon, it's the 100 meter. Day one of the heptathlon, it's the 100 meter hurdles. Day two of the decathlon is the 110 hurdles, and day two of the heptathlon, it's the long jump. So those are the events that the main call room will check, or those are the equipment for those events are the ones that will be covered by the main call room. But the athletes carry some pretty big bags of stuff with them when they come in there. And they have all the equipment, all the shoes and whatever that they're going to be using throughout the day with them. And that bag goes through. And before each event that is carried out, additional checks have to be made of all that equipment as it goes out before the event. So main call room does that little bit, and then the other checks are all done by the combined events call room officials. Next slide, please. Okay, the combined events rest area. This is an athlete's rest area. And normally it's a separate area that is set aside for the combined events athletes where they can rest between events. It should be a secure room because there will be times when the athletes have to leave some things behind, so it has to be a secure area. It is part of the call room, so whenever the rest area is established, it becomes part of the call room because call room checks are done there. It's also an area that is restricted, and it's restricted to the athletes and to one accredited team official for each group. And that official requires the appropriate rest area pass. So it's not an area that's open to just anybody. It's an area that is restricted. We restrict the access to, and that is the important part of this thing. We can't just let anybody in there. The only exception to that is that the athletes are able to bring in massage therapists if they need it between events. So that would be the only exception. Next slide, please. So we do have the rest area assigned, but it's not a requirement for the athletes to remain in the rest area between events. But they must report to the rest area at the time designated by the combined events referee in order to have their equipment checked before the next event. Athletes who want to leave the rest area to go to a warm-up area or to go to anywhere else must first come to the rest area to pick up their accreditation ID tag from the call room official before they can venture out into any other parts of the venue. The combined events call room officials, they have to stay in the area whenever is available to the athletes. There needs to be a call room official available in that room. Sometimes you can be there for quite a while sometimes. So suggested that you might want to bring a book with you or something like that, because you will have some time on your hands on occasion. The athletes will come and go, but you have to stay. Meals and refreshments are provided for the athletes. As an example, in Toronto in 2015, the combined events athletes all had a separate chef that provided them with food, and it was available to the officials as well. It was sort of a standard above what everybody else was getting at the main commissary, if you will. It was a pretty good deal, actually.
You got that right, Richard.
For those of us that were there. Next slide, please. All right, so the equipment that you're going to need if you're going to be assigned to this position as a combined events call room official, no different than what you're going to require when you're doing when you're in the main call room. You still need a spike gauge, maybe some extra spikes or a spike wrench. You're going to need a list of approved shoes. You're going to need some advertising templates, calipers for measuring the soles. Nice, it would be good to have a whiteboard or a bulletin board of some form. You'll need a bag for the accreditation of the ID tags that we'll talk about here again. You need a clock, obviously some pens, and the stopwatch, which we will talk about in just a minute, the reason for that. But as you can see, the list of equipment is no different than what the main call room would use. And that's because you're doing the same checks on the athletes' equipment as you would in the main call room. Next slide. So we're going to talk now about actually what the duties of the call room official would be. And this is prior to the meet. You're going to want to go have a look at the combined events rest area. You got to make sure that there's washroom facilities either in it or nearby. You're going to have to put the clock up and of course set the time, which is the time that the call room is using, so that we're all on the same page. And you're going to want to install a whiteboard if there's not one in the room already, or a bulletin board of some type. And you're going to put that stopwatch to use. So the one I talked about, you should bring with you. Because depending on where the combined events rest area is, you may have a bit of a trek to get to the athlete pickup area or to the event area. So you're going to have to do a little bit of timing before the event, so that you can determine how long it's going to take you to get from the combined events rest area out to wherever the athletes are going to be picked up, or to the venues themselves in some cases. So you're going to need to have those times available. In Toronto, we were under the main grandstand at the back, on the back side of it. So we were about in the middle, so we had to walk to either end to get back onto the track area or to the field event. So it wasn't too long, but at least we had a little bit of a walk ahead of us. And the location will vary. In Toronto, the track officials, the SAs on the track, had set up a position outside the track that we had to meet the athletes. Whereas the field events, we had to go right out to the field event themselves. So it will vary depending on the event and on the organization of that. I think we'll go to the next slide then. So then during the competition, once it's on, you're going to be in the main call room when the athletes first report for their first event of the day, and you're going to collect the ID tags from all the athletes. You're going to collect them and you're going to keep them with you at all times while they're out on the field of play. And when they come back to the rest area between events, then they can collect their tags and go to wherever they need to go. If they're going to stay in the rest area, then you're going to keep the tags. So, but they have to be recollected after between each event before they go out onto the field. The other thing you're going to do is the main purpose of your position there, and that is to make the checks, perform the checks, all the appropriate checks on the spikes, on the soles, on the shoes, on the advertising. Right there in the call room, in the rest area rather. There are occasions though where the checks might not be able to be performed in the rest area. There may be times when the combined events referee wants the athletes to report directly to the pickup area. So we had an occasion for that one time, and the athletes said they had to congregate at the meeting point for a track event. So we had to perform our checks right at that location when the athletes were standing there waiting to go onto the track area. We performed all the checks that were needed before they entered the track. They could also occur in the event area. For example, the first two events of the decathlon is 100 meters, followed immediately by the long jump. Well, the long jump has a 30-minute warm-up time. So at the end of that particular first event, in Toronto, the athletes went directly over to the long jump pit. So in order to facilitate the checks, we had to corner the athletes over while they're doing their warm-ups for the long jump and do all the appropriate checks while they were in their warm-up phase. So you have to be a little bit flexible. you have to sort of go with the flow. And that's just kind of the nature of the position. Next slide. So using your stopwatch times in consultation with the combined events referee, one of the other duties you have is to post times on the whiteboard or the bulletin board that the athletes must report back to the rest area. If they're going to leave, they have to know when they have to come back, and they have to come back in enough time so that the checks can be done before it's time to leave. So you're going to post the time they need to come back to the area, and then you'll also post the time they have to depart. We're going to depart the rest area. Other things that you'll need to do, you can post intermediate results up on the bulletin board, and you can post the heat sheets for the track events or the competition sheets for the field events on the bulletin board as well. And these usually are in the possession of the combined events referee. He'll provide you with that information, and you can post it on the board. Okay, on the next slide, please. Okay, as well, what you're going to do is you're going to escort the group out to the athlete pickup area or to the event location as appropriate, as you've arranged previously. You're going to be present during all the competition events to ensure that athletes are complying with the rules, and you're going to report any infractions that you observe to the combined events referee. And I'll give you an example of that. When we were doing the checks on the soles of the shoes in the decathlon and the long jump, one of the athletes is a gentleman from South America. He had a insert in his shoes that our calipers measured as being too big. It was the measurement was over what it was supposed to be. So he was asked to remove the inserts. He did so and did his first jump. And then he was observed trying to put the inserts back in his shoes. We asked him to take them out again, which he did. And then for a second time, that observation was made, and that's when we reported it to the combined events referee, and he dealt with the situation. So you're there to provide that support to the combined events referee as well. And then at the end of the event, you're going to lead the athletes off the track back to the rest area where they can pick up the rest of their stuff. One of the things you do, we talked about the athletes bringing these big bags with them and everything else. So those bags will often stay in the rest area, but they have things in the bags when you're doing your checks, things like elastics. They have headphones and those sorts of things that they take with them. They can use them in the rest area, but you have to make sure that they leave them in the bags, with it, either in the bags that they carry with them or in the bags that they're leaving in the rest area. So the things that might be that are somewhat illegal to bring on for other events, these guys carry with them, and as long as they keep them in their bags during the actual event, then they're allowed to do that. So it's kind of, we have little flexible things in there. And that's pretty much the duties of a combined events call room official. We go to the next slide. I think it says if we have any questions. And when I first presented this to Brian, he had a couple of questions. So I think the next slides are going to be Brian's questions. They're going to, he asked,
What's his gig?
how do you get assigned to be a combined events call room official? And is there any special training, or can anybody be a call room combined events call room official? Well, as you can see there, there's no special training because you're doing the same things that you're doing in the call room. You're measuring soles, you're checking templates for advertising, covering them up if necessary, which is something I left off the list. I just thought of, and that's tape, duct tape, so you can cover up the advertising. You kind of have to be a little more flexible though, and adjust to the environment, because you're doing those checks in some very different places. And how do you get assigned? Well, it's just as was before. The Ex Canada and the NOC chair does all the position assignments, and then it's up to those officials to determine whether there's a need for and who they're going to put into that slot. And the next question Brian had was, how many people are typically assigned to the call room? Well, as it's not used very often, there's no normal number assigned. We had 2 in Toronto. 2 was, I think, was a pretty good. We were able to get through all our checks with 2 people. 1 would be overwhelming, I guess, for 1 person when you've got a lot of athletes like we did have in the Pan Ams. And I will throw it open to any other questions that people might have, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them, or Jennifer can.
Thanks.
That was really good. Thank you very much. The first, you obviously got the 2 questions I had. I can see Mandy has her hand up. I'll pass it over. Mandy, you can ask your question, but there you go. Go ahead,
Okay,
Mandy.
yeah. Hi. I just wanted to know when he was talking about the athlete that wanted to put his insoles back in, why didn't they just confiscate them? Do you have to go through the combined events referee for confiscating anything, or can a call room referee do it? A call room official?
Yeah, whenever you're dealing with the combined events athletes, it's the call room, it's the combined events referee that makes all the decisions regarding anything like that.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Mandy. Anthony, how's the chat look?
Just one in the question about reporting, just asking where in the rules does it say that combined events call room judges report to the combined events referee?
They report to the I think the term is they work under in concert with the referee. The referee is in charge of all the combined events activities, and we work in concert with them to provide work on the times for people to be back. They have the final say in all of these things, and you will meet those people. You should probably touch base with them before the event starts, and they'll also be in the call room when when the athletes are in there. So you can arrange to travel with them as you escort the athletes over to their event or to the rest area.
In your experience, Richard, was there ever an issue between having the call room referee and the combined events referee and the chiefs? Was it ever did everybody work together, or issues?
No, everybody worked very well together. We had no communication issues at all. The experience in the call room was efficient, getting through, getting the athletes through, and then out to the events, and then you're out on your own, basically doing your checks outside. And I suppose you could look at it as looking after the rest area and making sure it's a secure place for the athletes and that they have all they need and that sort of thing. So
The rule is the first events of each day, the chief call room judge is in charge of, but the combined events referee is there and the combined events call room chief is there also with the supervision. So we work as a team, but once that group leaves for their first event of each day, the sole responsibility of the combined events belongs to the referee and the chief call room combined events official. I have no more, whoever is the call room referee or chief there at that time, your job is done after the first events leave each morning.
Thank you. Any other questions, either in chat or hands going up? Okay, well, thank you for that, Richard. It was really, I'm sure it sounds like a great experience, and thank you for
marvelous
sharing it with us. That was
Thank you,
nice.
Richard. You were awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, I want the next one though. Okay, now Jennifer, you were going to give us a quick update on the shoe inspection process and the status of that.
All right, a quick update on the shoe scheme. basically, we're looking at it. We have a meeting going to come up because it's been a bit crazy with teacher candidates and a lot of assignments that I've been assigned to do. But basically it comes down, number one, Athletics Canada has to do something with the declaration form, and they have to set the criteria and rules. Our group, which is, we've had our first meeting, which is Brian Thompson, Ian Reed, Larry Mayhew, Heather Climahagan, and myself. We're looking at it pre, during, and post, what the duties are for this shoe scheme. There is a document out from World Athletics talking about a shoe scheme officer and rules and regulations about shoes. And basically it comes down to, there could be in the post control event area that athletes will be inspected in that area as well. So that means no athlete can hand their shoes off to their coach to run around with a flag or anything else. They have to keep the shoes on, and they have to end up in the post control event area for remeasuring of their shoes so desired. I know there's lots of measurements right now, but in November of 2024, all shoes, field and track, will be 20 millimeters. Heather Climahagan is working with Vernon Schmidt to see what can be done with high tech to list on the flight sheets or the event sheets, list 1 or 2 pairs of shoes. So we can record and check off on those sheets that we've inspected the shoes. So there's still a little bit more work to be done, and hopefully the next week or so that we will have another meeting with these committee group that we've set up, and we can report back with some more information. So other than that, I'm happy to be on this webinar instead of shoveling snow here in Manitoba. Back to you, Brian.
All right, you're stocking up on sunscreen. I can see it in the back there. Any questions for Jennifer before, any questions for Jennifer? Okay. Yeah, Keith saying don't make it complicated, but yes, that's a very good
Yes,
point.
KISS principle. Keep it simple for the staff. Keep it simple for the athletes.
Yeah. Okay.
Totally agree, Keith.
So stay tuned for some communications on that. But maybe we'll probably end up doing it by email when that gets to the next stage of that. So this is the sort of the last session we'll have before the outdoor season starts, and we get really busy with that. We'll pick up the next session. We haven't scheduled it yet, but most likely when the things quiet down, the outdoor season, August, September timeframe. So in the meantime, best wishes for the season. Hope we have a good post-COVID season. Enjoy and think of topics that you want to have covered when we come back in the fall, and we'll set up an agenda and a schedule for continuing on at that point. So all the best, and thanks again to Bill, Andy, and Richard and Jennifer for their talks. It was, I found it really good. So thank you again. All the best.
Stay safe, everyone. Enjoy the outdoor season.